It's time for another comic book retrospective, and now we're going to one of the most important comics in modern DC, really. The re-establishment of the Joker within the Batman series, Batman 251, the Joker's Five-Way Revenge, and we do have the gang back together. With us, as always, is comic book editor, award-winning editor at that, and comic book writer Joe Corallo. How you doing, Joseph?
I'm all right, Wes. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. We've also got the man so cool they call him the Breen, the voice of the voiceless, the comic book hoarder himself, Eric Breen. How you doing, Eric?
Just swell.
So we're going to be, in order for time constraints, we're going to start concentrating on some key single issues. Batman 251 is up first, and I can't think of a better choice. This comes out in September 1973. Denny O'Neil and Neal Adams. And we hadn't really seen the Joker in DC Comics for probably, I think, 4 years since his last appearance before this was in a JLA comic. I think it was number 77. But before that, the Joker had been really changed to more of a prankster type character, Joe. And this is really the return of the maniacal, like homicidal Joker.
A lot of what Neal and Denny were doing were, sort of elevating the comics to that sort of next level, getting away from that, Adam West Batman kind of era. This is a key story in that stands the test of time, that DC is, constantly reprinting and putting out in collections, and is very aware of how important this story is.
Yeah, without this comic book specifically reintroducing this version of the Joker and updating him for a new audience, you don't have the Joker that we have today. Even the different versions that we do, you don't have the Joker Batman dynamic that we have today. This is such an influential book. It's probably the second most important Joker appearance other than Batman #1, his very first appearance, because this really sets the stage of what Joker's going to become, pretty much the most important villain in comic books, still to this day.
Yeah, it's important to note that the reason why we hadn't seen this Joker for a while was the introduction of the comics code took all the bite out of that character. And when he was used in the years that the code had teeth, that's when you got the prankster version, then you got the Batman series. But when Green Lantern, Green Arrow did the drug story, and then Spider-Man did the drug story, when the code started loosening its restrictions, that was about the time that Neal Adams and Denny O'Neil started doing the more adult Batman stories. So a couple years into that, it was a good time to reintroduce fans to the Joker that they hadn't seen since the 40s.
Denny's really building the world here in Gotham in a way that it really hadn't been for a while. I mean, before this, Batman's, he's traveling through time, he's going to alien worlds and stuff like that. All this time travel where he never saves his parents, but, it's interesting how Denny really resonated with Batman and was able to do this to Batman when he had less success with Superman and trying to make that work early on. He would go on to do some pretty solid Superman stories, but never quite hit the same way as Batman. He seemed to get Batman very quickly.
There's also really the unofficial return of really the Batman's entire rogues gallery. Prior to this, we really hadn't seen what we can think of as the villains associated, not just Joker, but Penguin, Catwoman, Riddler, all those wonderful characters that make up what Gotham, what it is. So very important comic book. Love that we're going to get to review it today. And the first things up, this is essentially Joker's return to Gotham, and he's getting his revenge. That's why it's called the Joker's Five-Way Revenge, by killing his old associates. Only a great writer like Denny O'Neil can come up with names like this. These are what criminals should sound like. Philly Jack Barton, Packy White, Bigger Melvin, and Bing Hooley? Are you kidding me? All those guys should be in the mob or something, right?
Yeah, they were.
Yep.
But they picked the wrong boss.
We do get this wonderful kind of opening scene. There's a murder out there, so one of the associates is already dead, but I believe it's Packy White and Batman. He's kind of holding the heavy bag for him, and he keeps punching Batman on purpose. They kind of keeps him, oh, it's no big deal. Thank you very much. And he ends up beating the crap out of him. It was great interaction.
The first one's my favorite part of the story. I said oops, I missed the bag. Think nothing of it. It's quite all right. And then just conversationally beats the living daylights out of Packy and convinces him that
And he respected him
prison's
more
not
for
so
it.
bad. Yeah, but I also like how
no.
when he found the first murder, he finds the card. They kind of intimate that this Joker's been around for a while, even though we haven't seen it. So it's kind of felt like you were coming in the middle of a movie. So you kind of get the feeling that he'd been this homicidal maniac for a while. We're just now getting to see it.
And we do see that Joker is able to kill Packy White right in front of him. I think he spikes his water with some Joker toxin, so he dies laughing. And basically, Joe, this is just Batman trying to catch up with Joker, who's always 1 or 2 steps ahead of him.
If people are reading this story today, the bit with the drinking the water and then he gets poisoned in that first interaction might be like, oh, come on, Batman. Don't you know this is what Joker always does? And it's like, it's not like now where Joker's doing that every couple of hours to someone. So they do such a good job at this, making it really enforcing how Gotham's this like kind of grimy, seedy kind of place where this stuff can happen. The police are doing the best they can. We get a little bit of Gordon in the beginning, but that the Joker's just so ruthless and he's dealing with such sleazy people that he's able to kind of get away with this. We get the big exploding cigar bit. That's another great
fantastic
panel. The explosion coming through the window with all the, ha-ha-has like throughout. Like they do such a good job throughout this comic of enforcing just how much, the Joker's just a laughing lunatic.
What they're also doing with Batman is they show how determined he is. He's never, he knows he's behind, but he's always trying to play catch up. He's getting hit over the head multiple times. Even Joker gets a drop on him. But it kind of shows how resourceful he is, Breen, because when Joker kicks him in the face, he leaves a little residue in there. And Batman, being the ultimate, detective, is able to decipher that and know exactly where Joker is, when it's time to find the last person. So I like how they're really pumping up Joker and the threat that he is, but they're also letting you know who Batman is. And Joker might be a lot of things, but he's not smarter than Batman. He's not smart enough to kind of outfox it.
True, but as you read the story, you think maybe it's not as far apart as you think, because Batman did let the guy convince him to go in front of him and then take the blackjack to the back of the head. That seemed kind of, that wasn't the brightest thing Batman's ever done. And I think that's why the Joker was able to knock him out with a kick, because he was already soft in the head from getting the blackjack. Joker might be fairly formidable, but that's probably about the only time he's ever going to be able to knock Batman out with one blow.
When we do see the bit where Batman's taken down, Joker sees it, and Joker's kind of disappointed. He's like, oh, I don't want to kill him like this. This isn't going to end our game the right way. So I'll let him live, and he'll know that I did this. And it kind of plays out, because if you keep reading Denny O'Neil's run, that's kind of how he focuses in the relationship, that Joker thinks this is all an enormous game, and he's having a lot of fun doing it, whereas Batman knows this is deadly serious, and he's putting all this work into it. So I think it really firmly establishes, at least from Joker's perspective, what their relationship is in the confrontation.
We can't just gloss over all the layouts and interesting artwork that Neal does with this. Page 11 with the Joker kind of like diagonally like taking up the middle of the page. It's just fantastic. And having like the light over his head, it's like his head is like obstructing the light fixture above it. It's really well done. But yeah, you just see the Joker and how he's, interpreting all of this, how he wants to deal with this. And it makes sense, because for him, he needs like one person to still live through all of this. He needs someone to tell the story. He needs someone out there saying like the Joker is a real threat. And it works in these stories, especially at this time, because this is well before we're dealing with, a DC Comics where it's like, my God, Joker's taking over Gotham again in April, again. But we're dealing at this point with the Joker's getting revenge on a few former associates of his. The Joker doesn't have these grand ambitions of like, I'm going to take over Gotham, I'm going to take over the world, I'm going to do this stuff. That's not who the Joker is at this point. And, I think that's just a product of a character being around so long and different writers and approaches trying to up the stakes. But like this right here, this is that like perfect blend, I feel, of, threat without going too far.
And that kind of brings us into this final confrontation. The Joker as initially, I believe his name's Being Hooley. That's the last thug that he's got kind of hemmed up. He's in an aquarium. Batman figures that out because he was found some oil and some sand. He's able to deduce where he was. And he gets in there, and it's so wonderful, Breen, because it's quintessential now what we understand as Joker. He's got this big elaborate scheme, and he's got a shark that he's going to use to eat him, and he threatens Batman, if you don't tie yourself up and drop yourself in with the shark, I'm going to throw Being Hooley in there. So Batman, he's got to make the sacrifice, but of course Joker throws him in there anyway. I loved it. It was so good.
You know, I mentioned before that you kind of got the feeling that Batman has dealt with this Joker before, but maybe not so much when he actually seems to trust the Joker not to throw Bing into the tank after him. He goes, "You promise?" He goes, "I'm a notorious liar." So I guess that was maybe for the audience that this is the new Joker that we're dealing with. Come on, Batman, you let a guy hit you over the head, and now you trust the Joker not to kick the guy in the wheelchair into the shark tank. But we're finding that, you know, this is not this. I guess as cliche as it sounds, this is not your father's Joker.
Yeah, it's your grandfather's Joker finally returning, Joe. What's fantastic, you're talking about Neal Adams' artwork and how fantastic it is. My favorite panel in here is where Batman, he's finally figured out how he's going to break through this aquarium as Joker's kind of getting away. He's taking this wheelchair, he's trying to break through the glass, and you can kind of see it starting to shatter. And then there's a close-up of his face as he's got the wheelchair over his head. And there's so much emotion, even with the cowl and everything. I was like, that is brilliant. That is Neal Adams right there.
This whole sequence, the brutal, pretty brutal murder of that shark, and just,
he does murder
and
the
everything.
shark.
It's like, and he's just like, come on, break. And, it's really intense. And yeah, that whole sequence of him, coming down on the glass, shattering the glass. It's really great, that whole bit. And then, we get some great bits with Batman chasing after the Joker and the cape. Neal and his attention to detail with things like the cape and being like, you know what, it's a visual medium. We're going to do some fun stuff with the cape and make it interesting. That's how you get so many great artists after that. You get your Jim Apparas, you get your Marshall Rogers and other people, Tim Sales, who then really go on and have a lot of fun with the cape, and a lot of that you can trace back to Neal.
There's one other thing to mention real quick, because this is another way you could tell this wasn't the 60s Batman anymore, because that Batman just would have pulled some bat shark repellent out of his utility belt and sprayed the sharks.
No, you're absolutely. Yeah, there's no gadgets. It's just a lot of cunning. I mean, there's not even there's no grappling hooks. There's no flying through the city. It's gritty sort of detective work. And the fact that Denny has, Bruce do even the most minuscule amount of detective work of just picking, say like, oh, I know where this is based on how the soil is. I mean, they overdo the soil samplings to figure out where things are in Batman comics. But at this point, it's good.
I love the ending of it here, Breen, when we finally get it and Joker's talking to himself. He's like, I'm no match for Batman. Now he's really mad. And I've been on the end of this beating before. It's not going to happen again. So he takes off running and he slips in the oil and he falls down and Batman gets him and beats the crap out of him again. That's a perfect ending. That's what Joker deserves.
I really like the part where he goes, yeah, no man alive is a match for Batman when he's this mad. This was a great ending, because after all this buildup, he slips on an oil slick, and it kind of makes Batman laugh, and the Joker says, well, that's not funny. So yes,
I giggled as a reader. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I said,
like, that's pretty good.
only a villain like you would make me glad for pollution. So
yeah.
That's
it's a perfect way to end it. Yeah, and it's a great callback to earlier, where it's like, oh, well, the Joker got the jump on Batman after Batman fell. He got hit in the head, knocked over, and then you get the same little bit here. Even the same kind of dynamic, like right hook to take him out. So
he rearranges his face for him.
Yeah,
Send him back to the mental hospital with the broken nose.
Yeah, it's nice. It's subtle. It's not like they're not beating you over the head with it. They don't they don't have dialogue in there where it's like, well, now I'm doing the same thing you did. It's just they just do it. It's great.
I love this. Is a 5-star comic if there ever was one. If you open it up and say you can go above 5, this is like a 6-star comic. This is the creme de la creme. Denny O'Neil, Neal Adams. The good thing about this one, Joe, is if you are a fan of Denny O'Neil, Neal Adams, you haven't read this comic book, you could find this quite easily. If you want the single, you don't have to go pay $1,000 or for $500, whatever it is, to buy a copy. A facsimile edition just came out a few years ago for the Joker movie of Batman 251 if you just want the single. But it is in so many collected editions. The Best of DC #2, The Greatest Joker Stories Ever Told, Batman Illustrated by Neal Adams Volume 3, Batman, The Greatest Stories Ever Told, The Joker, A Celebration of 75 Years, The Joker, 80 Years of the Clown Prince of Crime, Deluxe Edition. I know, Breen, you have an omnibus with it. You could find this comic book on your budget.
Oh, yeah. 100%. And you should. And I think it's important. Any Batman fan worth a damn should read this comic.
Thank you very much to Joe and Eric for joining me. Next week, we're going to be doing Daredevil #4 if you want to be ready for the next retrospective. If you can't get enough of comic book retrospective featuring Denny O'Neil and Neal Adams, we just retrospected this comic book not that long ago. It's a longer video. We go through every issue of this comic story. If you love Denny O'Neil, you love Neal Adams Batman, this is a video you're definitely going to find worth the time.